World War II was a devastating time, not only on the front, but also on the home and workforce. During this time, there was a great need for responsibility, leadership, and inspiration. At this time, women stepped forward to fill the shoes of a temporary man and showed the world that they could make a difference when the world was finally ready to listen.
My name is Mark with K. Well, you see here, before World War II, your woman was just your typical housewife, you know, sitting at home doing your laundry, cook, clean, nothing much more than that.
My name is the Reverend Dr. Ben Dova from the genteel Southern House of Dova out of Southern Missouri. I did a short stint at Berkeley and Cambridge where I studied women's history and rights. The women in World War II, they had their sort of changing times for them as they migrated from sort of more home front sort of thing where they stayed at home, did the cooking, cleaning, took care of the little kindling, and then they moved into more of a powerful movement during the war.
My name is Becky with a K. I went to Harvard and I was learning about World War II and some of the organizations that were a big part of that time. So some of the biggest organization was the Voluntary Aid Detachments, which was the VADs, and they came from a variety of different backgrounds. It was an important job because those people who were in the higher class, they could get involved with something and feel proud of themselves. And, you know, it was just a really good way for them to get involved. Another job that was very specific for farming was the Women's Land Army, WLA. That was also really important because we weren't really getting a lot of anything imported because of the war that was going on, obviously. So everything had to be put together and farmed in America. So women would join the Women's Land Army and they would live on the crops and produce everything, and basically they were powering the country. And those kinds of things, the crops, they would send out to the soldiers that were serving across the seas. Almost 9 million men were sent to Europe for that. So there was really not very many men that were in the United States. So women really had to take control. So when they joined, they were given a uniform. They were paid 18 shillings a week, but 12 went to board and food. Work was hard. So the lifestyle was just hard because all their hard work and all their money pretty much just went to keeping stable. I mean, they really weren't able to save very much. Occasionally they would splurge on a new pair of socks. Anyway, so that was a really important part. You know, these jobs, most importantly, allowed a stable environment, which a lot of the world didn't have because America was fairly new. And so, you know, our crops, our soil was really fertile. In addition, American Red Cross, that was founded by Clara Barton, amazing woman, amazing. She did amazing things. But she founded that in 1881 during World War I. But it wasn't really big during that time. During World War II, it was the largest civilian organization that provided vital services to not only the U.S. but also on the front. By 1945, that was the end of the war. There was 36.7 million adult members. That was amazing. Almost every household participated in some way. And that was mostly the women again, because almost all the men were gone. So that would have been a frustrating time as a woman. But really, the most important thing was that women just really stepped up to fill the role of this temporary man. And they really made a huge difference, and they were kind of the power behind America.
The government decided to launch a propaganda campaign to sell the importance of the war effort and to lure women into working. They promoted the fictional character of Rosie the Riveter as the ideal woman worker, loyal, efficient, patriotic, and pretty. A song, Rosie the Riveter, became very popular in 1942. Norman Rockwell's image on the cover of the Saturday Evening Post on May 29th in 1943 was the first widely publicized pictorial representation of the new Rosie the Riveter. This led to many other Rosie images and women to represent that image. Rosie was an instant media success. In many other locations and situations around the country, Rosies were found and used in the propaganda effort. A few months after Rockwell's image, the most famous image of Rosie appeared in the government commission poster, "We Can Do It." Women responded to the call to work differently depending on age, race, class, marital status, and number of children. Half of the women who took war jobs were minority and lower class women who were already in the workforce. They switched from lower paying traditionally female jobs to higher paying factory jobs. But even more women were needed, so companies recruited women just graduating from high school. Eventually it became evident that married women were needed even though no one wanted them to work, especially if they had young children. It was hard to recruit married women because even if they wanted to work, many of their husbands did not want them to. Initially, women with children under 14 were encouraged to stay home to care for their families. The government feared that a rise in working mothers would lead to a rise in juvenile delinquency. Eventually, the demands of the labor market were so severe that even women with children under 6 years old took jobs. While patriotism did influence women, ultimately it was the economic incentives that convinced them to work. Once at work, they discovered the non-material benefits of working, like learning new skills, contributing to the public good, and proving themselves in jobs once thought of as only men's work.
Men went off to war, and women vowed to do their part on the home front. Everyone was united with one common goal, to win the war, and women wanted and were expected to do their share. Thousands of women joined the military in exclusive women's services such as waves and wax. Many volunteered as nurses' aides. The no effort was too small. Women did everything from purchasing bonds that helped finance the war to collecting tin cans and other scrap metals that could be used in building war equipment. They even saved bacon grease, which was used in making ammunition. And when food, clothing, and gasoline were rationed, they learned to make do with what they had, and many planted victory gardens to grow their own vegetables. Nylons were considered a luxury because the materials were being used to make parachutes and tents for the soldiers. Women were encouraged to wear ankle socks instead. From coast to coast, many factories converted over to war production. But as more and more men went off to war, they left a huge void in the workforce, and there was a desperate need to fill their shoes. But who could they find who was strong enough, hard-working enough, and not afraid of heavy labor? Women. Everywhere women looked, there were signs pointing the way to jobs. Uncle Sam was making every effort to lure women into the factories to fill these vacant positions. There were even door-to-door campaigns encouraging women to do their patriotic duty and enter the workforce. Many homes had blue stars hanging on the doors indicating a loved one serving in the military. Chances are the women who lived here were happy to oblige. In fact, many women took on the challenge and went off to work. They rolled up their sleeves, tied up their hair, and said, "We can do it." And they did. Over 6 million of them who came to be known as Rosie the Riveters. But they weren't all riveters. There were many different production jobs. And after putting up with a little teasing from their male co-workers who sent them off to the tool crib for fictitious items such as airplane stretchers, these women settled in and helped to build thousands of airplanes, warships, and billions of rounds of ammunition.
Once the war ended, federal and civilian policies uprooted women from their jobs and replaced them with men. Women were expected to return to their roles as mother and housewife. Unbelievably, the women that wanted to pursue a career were often criticized and labeled as lost. Basically, society looked down on the working women at this time. Fortunately for women, it got better. By the 1960s, more married women in the U.S. held jobs than ever before in history. However, it wasn't easy for a gal to find a job, especially one that didn't involve factory work or secretary positions. It wasn't long before families began to embrace the idea of two household incomes, though. More money allowed a more comfortable and luxurious lifestyle. Although culture continued to pressure women to stay home, more and more women were going out to find work and pursue a career. In 1960, 22% of women in America were a part of the workforce, which is a surprisingly high percentage considering the social barriers a woman had to break to leave the life of a full-time homemaker.
Women were excited to take the roles of men who had gone, but this task had a greater purpose. For thousands of years, they had been prosecuted and ignored, but the world could not ignore them any longer once they showed that they were important. They showed they were not a temporary man, but their own kind of heroes.
As we can see today, women have come a long way. In 1963, the Equal Pay Act was passed. This was a huge win for women's rights because it made it illegal for women to be paid less than men. Today, women make up 46% of the labor force and continue to take up more than half of management positions available. Although World War II was a tragic time, it did help women establish a place in the workforce and encourage them to make a life for themselves outside of the home.